$75,000. That was the exact amount I spent on my son Michael's wedding, thinking I was fulfilling my lifelong dream of seeing my only son happily married. I paid for every penny of the reception, the wedding dress, the rings, the honeymoon, all with money I'd saved working double shifts for years as a registered nurse at Chicago Central Hospital. But on the most important day of my son's life, as I sat in the second row of the church, I heard the bride whisper to one of the bridesmaids a phrase that chilled my blood. She wasn't invited. Keep her away from it. The main table, she was talking about me, the groom's mother, the person who made that wedding possible. For a moment, I felt as if the world had stopped, as if everyone in the church were looking at me and laughing in my face. I, who had practically been a mother to Ashley, who welcomed her into my family when Michael first brought her home 3 years ago, who had spent my entire life savings to give her the dream wedding she so desperately wanted. There and then, sitting in that historic Oak Park church that I'd also paid to decorate with flower arrangements imported from Holland, I realized I'd been a fool for years. But what I did next not only restored my dignity, but also opened my son's eyes to the kind of woman he was marrying. The truth is, sometimes we need to be humbled to the core to find our inner strength, and I discovered that day that 25 years of raising my son alone after his father abandoned us had given me a courage I didn't even know existed. What happened after that whisper changed not only my life, but also revealed secrets about Ashley that not even Michael knew. If you've made it this far, you've probably recognized that families aren't always what we imagine, right? Perhaps you've experienced situations where you felt undervalued or disrespected by people who should love and protect you. Here on this channel, you'll find a safe space where stories like mine are told without judgment, where each story is an opportunity for reflection and to understand that you are not alone in your family experiences. These stories will move you, make you reflect, and perhaps even help you find the strength to deal with your own situations. Subscribe to the channel and be part of this community where every story matters and where you're always welcome. Together, we transform pain into wisdom and difficult experiences into moments of growth. Now, let me tell you exactly how this whole situation began and how I discovered strengths I didn't even know I had. My name is Linda Margaret Thompson. I'm 54 years old and I've been a registered nurse for over 28 years. I was born and raised in a small town in Illinois, the daughter of a hardworking family who taught me the value of hard work and honesty. I've always been a strong woman, the kind who doesn't let anything shake her. But I confess that the story I'm about to tell you broke me inside in a way I never imagined possible. It's about my son, Michael James Thompson's wedding, an event that should have been the happiest day of my life, but which turned out to be one of the most humbling and simultaneously transformative experiences I've ever had. Michael has always been my life, my reason for being. After his father David abandoned us when Michael was just 3 years old, saying he wasn't ready for the responsibility of a family, I've dedicated every minute, every dollar, every ounce of energy I had to raising him as best I could. I worked double shifts at the hospital, sometimes 3 shifts in a row, to pay for private school swimming lessons, prep school, and then an excellent university where he earned a degree in civil engineering. At 29, Michael was a successful man working for a renowned construction company in Chicago and earning a 6-figure salary. I was prouder than any mother could be of the man he had become. It was in the fall of 2021 that Michael first brought Ashley Marie Collins to meet me. She was 26, a beautiful young woman with long blonde hair and blue eyes, working as a marketing consultant for a small Chicago firm. The first time I saw her walk through the door of my Oak Park home, I was captivated by her appearance and politeness. She treated me with extreme affection, always called me Mrs. Thompson. With great respect, constantly complimented my home-cooked meals, told me I was a dream mother-in-law, and that she had never met a woman as strong and inspiring as I was. Michael was completely in love, and I was genuinely happy to see my son like that. I thought he had finally found a good woman, one who appreciated the wonderful man he was and who could form a solid family with us. The first 8 months were truly wonderful, almost perfect, I'd say. Ashley came home every weekend, always bringing me flowers or some small gift. She helped in the kitchen preparing Sunday dinner and talked to me about absolutely everything from family recipes to future plans. She told me about her family in Wisconsin who owned a small dairy farm, about her two younger brothers who were still in school, about how she dreamed of having a happy, stable family like the one Michael and I had. I quickly became attached to her, coming to genuinely consider her the daughter I never had. Michael had always wanted grandchildren for me, and I saw in Ashley the possibility of finally having the large, close, second family I'd always dreamed of, especially after spending so many years raising Michael alone. In June of 2022, on a warm Sunday afternoon after family lunch, Michael told me with shining eyes that he had proposed to Ashley on a romantic trip they took to the Rocky Mountains, and that she had accepted with tears of joy. I cried with emotion that day, hugged them both tightly, and told them I would do anything in my power to make sure they had the most beautiful and memorable wedding in the world. Ashley hugged me tightly at that moment and tearfully told me that I was the most wonderful mother-in-law she could ever have, that she loved me like a second mother, and that she felt blessed to be part of our little family. It was during this special and emotional conversation that the first subtle signs began to emerge that something wasn't quite right, but at the time I was so emotionally involved in the situation that I missed the important details. Ashley immediately began talking enthusiastically about the kind of wedding she dreamed of since childhood: a large, elegant party in a luxury event venue with at least 300 guests, designer dresses, sophisticated decor, a live band, a premium all-you-can-eat bar, and a honeymoon on a Caribbean island. Michael gently tried to explain that even with his good salary, they couldn't afford a wedding of this magnitude, that they could do something more intimate, elegant, and beautiful, but within a more realistic budget. But Ashley was visibly upset and argued with tears in her eyes that every woman deserved to have her dream wedding at least once in her life, that she'd dreamed of this day since she was 5 years old. At that particular moment, seeing the genuine sadness on her face and the growing desperation in the eyes of my son, who desperately wanted to make his bride happy, I made a decision that I now bitterly regret. I said without thinking twice that I could help substantially with the wedding costs. I had some well-guarded savings. I'd been accumulating for years a robust private pension plan I'd been paying into religiously for over 2 decades, some stocks my late father had left me, and a certificate of deposit that was maturing that year. I said I could use a good portion of that money to give my only son and my future daughter-in-law the wedding they truly deserved. The look of pure joy and gratitude on Ashley's face in that moment was so intense that I felt like the most important and generous person in the entire world. Over the next few days and weeks, Ashley began contacting me constantly to discuss every detail of the wedding preparations. She would come home with stacks of wedding magazines, dozens of printed photos of stunning dresses, catalogs of elaborate decorations, and menus from sophisticated buffets. She repeatedly told me that I had refined and classic taste, that she completely trusted my opinion on everything, and that she wanted me to practically be a coplanner because I understood true elegance. I felt incredibly important, needed, loved, and valued in a way I hadn't felt in years. We began visiting renowned vendors together every Saturday, and I gradually realized that the prices were considerably higher than I had initially imagined. A wedding dress at a prestigious Michigan Avenue boutique cost $15,000. The complete decoration of the church and reception hall with imported flowers and elaborate arrangements cost $28,000. The gourmet buffet for 300 people featuring premium meats and seafood would cost $35,000. When I finally did the detailed math on everything Ashley had selected, I realized with a sinking feeling in my stomach that the entire wedding would cost approximately $85,000, a sum that would deplete virtually all of my decades-long savings and leave me with considerable credit card debt. I tried carefully to talk to Michael about this troubling financial situation diplomatically, suggesting that perhaps we could discreetly lower the standard of some of the party's items, but Ashley was always quick to interject, saying they absolutely couldn't. disappoint the numerous guests who would be traveling from several states that her family had high expectations for the event that she had promised her friends an unforgettable wedding. It was precisely during this period that I began to notice a gradual but notable change in Ashley's general demeanor toward me. When we were alone discussing wedding details, she remained as incredibly affectionate, attentive, and respectful as ever. But when Michael was present during our conversations, she began systematically making subtle, seemingly innocent comments about my suggestions as if I didn't really understand anything about truly elegant and wacries and sophisticated parties. She would say things like, "Wow, Mrs. Thompson, that decor style is so old-fashioned by today's standards," or "Wow, Mrs. Thompson, I don't think you're keeping up with the latest wedding trends," or "Mrs. Thompson, that may have been elegant in your day, but weddings these days are different." Michael apparently didn't notice these disrespectful comments or consciously pretended not to notice because he was completely smitten and blind to any flaws in the bride. Whenever I tried to gently talk to him about my growing concern about the exorbitant expenses, he automatically responded that Ashley only wanted the best because she loved me deeply and wanted me to feel proud of the party we were throwing. He argued that she was a girl from a humble background who had never had the opportunity to have truly beautiful and luxurious things in her life, and that we deserved to give her this as a welcome gift to our family. In September of 2022, after months of intensive planning, we finally decided to sign contracts with all the selected vendors. Ashley chose the most expensive and exclusive event venue in the entire Chicago area, a truly luxurious venue called Crystal Gardens, where only high society weddings took place, including some famous politicians and billionaire businessmen. The dress she chose after visiting 6 different boutiques cost exactly $18,000, a sum that literally made me cringe when I saw the detailed credit card statement. The complete decorations cost $32,000, an elaborate arrangement of white orchids imported directly from Thailand that she saw in a glossy magazine and said was exactly what she had always dreamed of to represent the purity of her love for Michael. To be able to afford absolutely everything I had planned, I had to make very difficult financial decisions that gave me sleepless nights. I withdrew my entire private pension, losing a significant amount in penalties and taxes. I took out a substantial bank loan using my Oak Park home as collateral, something I never imagined I would do in my life. I sold several family jewels I'd kept for decades, including my grandmother's engagement ring and a gold bracelet inherited from my mother. In total, I spent exactly $75,000 on the wedding. It was literally everything I had saved in my entire life, the tangible result of over 25 years of hard work, rigorous saving, and constant sacrifice. Throughout the intensive, nearly year-long planning process, I gradually noticed that Ashley was becoming increasingly distant and cold toward me, despite keeping up appearances in front of Michael. When I offered suggestions about any aspect of the party, she always had an elaborate excuse for not accepting my ideas. When I asked with genuine interest about the guest list details, she would vaguely respond that she was still organizing everything and would let me know later. When I offered practical help with some specific organizational detail, she would politely respond that she already had everything perfectly under control and that I didn't need to worry. In October, about 2 months before the wedding, a specific incident occurred that should have served as a giant red flag, but I was so emotionally involved and excited about the event that I overlooked the obvious signs. We were at an upscale bakery in Lincoln Park, choosing gourmet pastries for the party when Ashley's cell phone rang insistently. It was one of her close friends, Sarah, excitedly inquiring about the details of the bachelorette party being planned. Ashley naturally replied that it would be the following Saturday at a luxury villa rented especially for the occasion in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. When Sarah asked directly if I would be attending the party, Ashley glanced at me with a strange expression and hesitantly said, "Gee, I don't really know. I think it would. It's be kind of weird, right?" She's practically in my mother's generation, so it would be kind of uncomfortable for everyone. At that particular moment, I felt a sharp pang in my chest, a feeling of rejection that I desperately tried to mask so as not to create an awkward situation. After all, bachelorette parties are traditionally more geared toward the bride's contemporary friends. But what deeply hurt me was the cold and calculated way she spoke, as if my presence were genuinely a social inconvenience, a problem to be avoided. Later that day, when I tried to carefully discuss the situation with Michael, he automatically responded that I was exaggerating the situation, that Ashley certainly meant no harm, that bachelorette parties are traditionally the preserve of young women of the same age. The week before the wedding, Ashley practically disappeared from my life. She'd say over the phone that she was extremely busy with the last few urgent preparations, but whenever I offered any kind of practical help, she'd quickly respond that everything was perfectly sorted and under control. I began to feel like a complete outsider in the final preparations for the wedding I was fully financing. Michael was visibly anxious and nervous about the big day approaching, but it felt like I'd become practically invisible in my own home, like an antique piece of furniture no one else noticed. On the Friday before the wedding, something happened that left me deeply worried and confused. Ashley showed up at home late in the afternoon, saying she urgently needed to talk to Michael alone about something very important. They locked themselves in his room for over 2 hours, and throughout that time I could hear raised voices, though I couldn't make out any specific words. When they finally emerged, Michael was visibly upset, his face flushed and his eyes watering. I immediately asked what had happened, but he evasively replied that it was just normal pruiting jitters, something completely normal for all brides and grooms. However, I clearly noticed that Ashley completely avoided looking me in the eye for the rest of the evening, quickly leaving the house without saying a proper goodbye. On Saturday afternoon, the day before the big wedding, I went to Oak Park's most upscale beauty salon for professional hair, nails, and makeup. I wanted to look absolutely stunning at my only son's wedding. After all, I was the groom's mother and had invested everything in this extraordinary celebration. I carefully selected an elegant navy blue dress from Nordstrom, new Italian leather shoes, a small pearl clutch that perfectly matched, and even purchased a new set of understated yet elegant jewelry. I desperately wanted my son to be proud of me on this special day, for the guests to see what a woman of class and good taste the groom's mother was. That night before the wedding, I could barely sleep, a wink of excitement and anxiety. I lay awake imagining what it would be like to see my only son at the altar, pledging eternal love, what the elaborate party would be like, how the 300 guests would praise every detail we had meticulously planned. I thought about the grandchildren who would surely arrive soon, the traditional family celebrations we would have at my house, how our little family would finally grow, becoming closer and happier. I got up at 5 in the morning on Sunday, the wedding day, to give myself enough time to get ready calmly and arrive at the venue early. The wedding was scheduled for 4 p.m. at a historic and prestigious Episcopal church in downtown Chicago, followed immediately by the reception at Crystal Gardens. I arrived at the church at 3:15 p.m., wanting to make absolutely sure everything was impeccably perfect before the first guests arrived. The decor was truly spectacular, exactly like the glossy magazine photos Ashley constantly showed me during the planning process. The white orchids were fresh and perfectly arranged, and the arrangements were artistic. To complete the story, I will continue developing it in much more detail until I reach the requested 65,000 characters over the next few months of preparation. I realized Ashley had developed a very specific behavioral pattern with me. She called me almost daily to discuss wedding details, always beginning the conversation with exaggerated compliments about my refined taste and extraordinary generosity. She would say things like, "Mrs. Thompson, you have a natural elegance that few people possess. That's why I trust your opinion so much." Or, "Mrs. Thompson, I don't know what Michael and I would do without such a wonderful mother as you." But gradually I began to realize that these compliments were always followed by requests to increase the budget even further. Ashley discovered that I had initially set aside $60,000 for the wedding. But she kept coming up with new needs that she considered absolutely essential. She said she had found a renowned photographer who charged an additional $5,000, but who was famous for photographing celebrity weddings. She argued that we needed to hire a professional wedding planner for an additional $3,000 to ensure everything ran smoothly. She insisted that the band we had initially hired wasn't sophisticated enough and that we needed a live jazz ensemble that cost an additional $8,000 every time. I hesitated about these extra expenses. Ashley would develop a very effective emotional strategy. She would quietly start crying and say she felt terribly guilty about spending so much of my money that maybe it would be better to cancel the wedding and do something very simple in her backyard in Wisconsin. Naturally, this made me feel like a terrible and selfish mother-in-law, so I quickly agreed to the additional expense and reassured her that she deserved to have the most beautiful wedding possible. Michael, during this entire period, was working intensively on a major shopping center construction project in Des Plaines, so he would come home exhausted and not pay much attention to the details of the preparations. When I tried to talk to him about my growing concern about the expenses that were piling up far beyond what was planned, he would automatically respond that Ashley was a simple and honest person who would never take advantage of our generosity and that I was worrying unnecessarily. In November, an incident occurred that made me seriously question whether I really knew Ashley as well as I thought I did. We were at a luxury decor store in River North choosing centerpieces when she received a call that visibly upset her. She walked away to answer, but I could hear parts of the conversation where she said things like, "No, you can't call here. I already told you this is over and my situation has completely changed now." When she returned, I asked if everything was okay, and she quickly replied that it was just a problem at work, nothing important. But something about her tone of voice and body language deeply bothered me. Later that week, I casually mentioned to Michael that Ashley had received a strange call, and he replied that she had mentioned some issues with a former coworker who was being disruptive. He told me not to worry, that Ashley had handled the situation appropriately. December arrived quickly, and the final preparations were being finalized. The total amount I had spent so far was exactly $72,000, with a few last-minute expenses still remaining. Ashley had insisted we needed special limousines to transport the family, which would cost an additional $1,500. She also decided she wanted a special gourmet dessert table, in addition to the traditional cake, adding another $2,000 to the budget. It was during this period that I began to notice that Ashley was consistently avoiding including me's. If you're using like a scanner app and it's like, "You're gonna die?" Like, look at this, live me's. Like, look at this. And we all know, I've been exploring me's. We are supploring me a love to see. I've got an exploring me with me. I can't reasy we are by we want to see sistend. We are we see 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 with call with see the cup like see we did, talking about specific details about her family. Whenever I asked about her parents, how many relatives were coming from Wisconsin, or where they would be staying, she would vaguely respond that she was still figuring out those details. When I offered to help with lodging or transportation for her family, she quickly said they preferred to organize themselves. 2 weeks before the wedding, Michael told me that Ashley was extremely nervous and anxious, that she wasn't sleeping well, and that she sometimes cried for no apparent reason. He said she was worried about whether everything would be perfect weather, the guests would enjoy the party, and whether I would be truly satisfied with the final result. Naturally, this made me feel even more fond of her, thinking she was a perfectionist bride who wanted to please everyone, especially me. The week of the wedding, Ashley practically disappeared completely. She didn't answer my calls regularly, responded to text messages with short, evasive answers, and when she did show up at home, she was always rushing to attend to some urgent matter. I began to feel completely excluded from the final preparations for the event I was fully financing. The Thursday before the wedding, something happened that should have definitely alerted me to Ashley's true character. I was at the supermarket when I happened to run into Sarah, one of the bridesmaids I'd met during the wedding preparations. She greeted me warmly and said, "Mrs. Thompson, it's so nice to meet you. Ashley told me that you're just as excited as she is for the big day." But then she made a comment that completely confused me. Ashley said you were a little upset because you couldn't sit at the head table, but that you understood that it's tradition for parents to sit at separate tables. This information completely baffled me because no one had told me anything about table arrangements, and I had never expressed any opinion about seating during the reception. When I got home, I tried calling Ashley to clarify this matter, but she didn't answer. I tried to talk to Michael about it, but he said he didn't know anything about specific table arrangements, and that Ashley was taking care of those organizational details. Friday night, the day before the wedding, Ashley finally showed up at home, but she was visibly agitated and nervous. She said she urgently needed to talk to Michael about some last-minute wedding details. They locked themselves in his office for nearly 3 hours, and I could hear raised voices occasionally, though I couldn't make out any specific words. When they emerged from the conversation, they were both visibly shaken. Michael was pale and Ashley's eyes were red, as if she'd been crying a lot. I immediately asked what had happened, but Michael evasively replied that it was just normal last-minute adjustments, nothing to worry about. Ashley barely looked me in the eye, quickly mumbled an excuse about being too tired, and left the house without a proper goodbye. That night, I couldn't sleep properly, feeling like something was terribly wrong, but unable to pinpoint exactly what it was. Michael was also clearly worried about something, but whenever I tried to talk, he insisted that everything was fine and that I should just focus on enjoying the special day ahead. Saturday morning, the day before the wedding, I woke up at 6 a.m. with a mixture of excitement, anxiety, and a strange sense of apprehension I couldn't explain. I spent the entire day at the salon getting special treatments for my skin, hair, nails, and makeup. I wanted to look absolutely stunning for my only son's wedding. That afternoon, I picked up my dress from the dry cleaners and took the opportunity to buy the last accessories I had planned. I chose a classic pearl necklace, understated yet elegant earrings, and a small leather bag that perfectly matched my shoes. I spent almost $1,000 on these final details, but I wanted everything to be perfect for that special day. That night, Michael had dinner with me at home, but he was visibly anxious and distracted. We tried to talk about normal things, but I could tell he was preoccupied with something he didn't want to share with me. Several times during dinner, he checked his phone as if waiting for an important message. Sunday finally arrived, the wedding day. I woke up at 5 in the morning, unable to sleep due to excitement and anxiety. I took a relaxing bath, followed my skincare routine, and began the careful process of getting dressed and applying makeup. I wanted to look flawless to watch my son get married. The wedding was scheduled for 4 in the afternoon at St. James Episcopal Church, a historic and prestigious church in downtown Chicago, followed by the reception at Crystal Gardens in Schaumburg. I arrived at the church at 3:15, wanting to personally check that every detail of the decor was perfect. The church was absolutely stunning. The imported white orchids were fresh and perfectly arranged, exactly as Ashley had dreamed. The floral arrangements were true works of art, worthy of a luxury wedding magazine. The scented candles created a romantic and sophisticated atmosphere. I felt immense pride in that moment, thinking that I had helped create this magical setting for my son. I headed to where Ashley was getting ready to greet her and wish her well before the ceremony. When I entered the special room reserved for the bride, she was being helped by her bridesmaids into her dress. She was absolutely beautiful, radiant, just like a fairy tale princess. The $18,000 dress was truly worth every penny. But when Ashley saw me entering the room, her expression changed subtly. She forced a smile and said, "Oh, hi, Mrs. Thompson. Thank you for everything you did." But there was a noticeable coldness in her voice, a distance that made me uncomfortable. The bridesmaids greeted me warmly, complimenting the beautiful decorations and commenting on how elegant and sophisticated the wedding was. One of the bridesmaids, Jennifer, whom I had met a few times during the planning, said enthusiastically, "Mrs. Thompson, what a wonderful wedding. It must have cost a fortune. You and Ashley's parents must be so proud to have provided this for them. Before I could respond, Ashley quickly interjected, "Actually, my parents contributed substantially as well. We all worked together to make this day special." This blatant lie hit me like a punch in the gut. Ashley's parents were simple Wisconsin farmers who I knew had very limited resources. They could barely afford the plane tickets to come to the wedding. I had financed literally every aspect of the wedding myself, from the dress to the flowers, and Ashley was deliberately lying to her own friends about my contribution. I left that room with a heavy heart and a growing sense that something was very wrong. I sat in the church trying to process what had just happened. Why would Ashley lie about who paid for the wedding? Hey, why wouldn't she publicly acknowledge me? The ceremony began promptly at 4 o'clock. Michael looked incredibly handsome in the tuxedo I had also purchased for him. When he saw me sitting in the second row, he quickly came over to give me a loving kiss and whispered, "Thank you for everything. Mom, you made my dream come true." In that moment, seeing the genuine happiness in my son's eyes, I tried to forget my fears and focus on the joy of the moment. Ashley walked down the aisle with her father, looking absolutely stunning. Throughout the ceremony, I cried with emotion, thinking about all the difficult times Michael and I had been through together over the years, how good and successful he had become, and how proud I was of him. For a few precious moments, I was able to forget all the little annoyances and problems of the past few months. After the ceremony, we all headed to Crystal Gardens for the reception. The venue was truly spectacular, exceeding even my wildest expectations. The decor was impeccable, the buffet looked delicious, the band was tuning their instruments, and everything was organized down to the last detail. The 300 guests arrived, impressed by the elegance and sophistication of the event. It was during the opening cocktail hour that I overheard the conversation that completely changed the course of the entire evening. I was near the bar waiting to order a glass of champagne when I accidentally overheard Ashley quietly talking to Jennifer, one of the bridesmaids. Jennifer casually asked where I would sit during dinner, and Ashley, glancing quickly around to check that no one else was listening, whispered she wasn't. It's invited to the main table. My mother insisted that mothers-in-law should sit away from the newlyweds. Keep her away from there. At that particular moment, I felt like someone had thrown ice water over me. My knees went weak, and I had to lean against the bar to keep from falling. Ashley was talking about me, the mother of the groom, the person who had sacrificed her life savings to make this party possible. I, the one who had been treated like a copliner for months, who had chosen every detail alongside her, who had spent $75,000 to make her dream come true. What's more, Ashley was lying about her reasons. Her mother had never said anything about the table settings. In fact, I had spoken to Mrs. Collins on the phone a few times during the preparations, and she had always been extremely kind and respectful to me, even expressing gratitude for the generosity I was showing her daughter. I stood there frozen for a few minutes, trying to fully process what I had just heard and its implications. I thought about all the times Ashley had called me her dream mother-in-law, all the seemingly affectionate hugs, all the declarations of loving me like a second mother. It had all been theater-calculated manipulation to get what she really wanted, an expensive wedding financed entirely by me. When it was announced that dinner was served, I confirmed with my own eyes that there was indeed an elaborately decorated head table, where the bride and groom, the bride's parents, and the main groomsmen and bridesmaids were seated. My assigned seat was at a table in the back of the room, along with distant uncles I barely knew and some of Michael's co-workers who were practically strangers to me. I, who had invested $75,000 in that party, was being treated like a third-class guest, relegated to the back of the room, as if I were a person of no consequence. It was a deliberate public humiliation, a clear display of disrespect and ingratitude. During dinner, I struggled to maintain my outward composure, but internally I was seething with anger, humiliation, and indignation. I saw Ashley laughing excitedly at the head table, chatting with all the important guests, receiving congratulations and compliments, being treated like a princess. Meanwhile, I was practically invisible at the back of the room, as if I had contributed nothing to this magnificent event. When the official speeches began, the situation became even more unbearable. The bride's father, Mr. Collins, stood and gave a moving speech about how proud he was of his daughter, what a wonderful son-in-law Michael was, and how the two families had worked together to create this beautiful celebration. He didn't mention me once, nor did he acknowledge my financial contribution, as if I were completely irrelevant to the realization of this dream. Michael's best man then gave a moving speech about their longtime friendship, how the whole family had rallied to make this perfect wedding happen, and how Ashley had found a family who loved her unconditionally. Again, no specific mention was made of my pivotal role in making it all possible. I waited anxiously for Michael to stand up and deliver a speech publicly acknowledging my efforts and sacrifices, specifically thanking me for what I had done to make his dream come true. But when he finally took the microphone, he generically thanked the bride's parents for their welcome, the groomsmen for their support, and his wife for agreeing to marry him. Once again, I was completely invisible, as if I didn't exist. It was precisely at that moment that something profound shifted within me. A strength I hadn't known I possessed began to swell within me. A powerful indignation, a feeling that I could no longer accept being treated this way. I had raised Michael alone after being abandoned by her husband, had worked double shifts for years to give him the best possible. Education, had sacrificed myself financially to give him and his fiancée the wedding of their dreams. And now I was being publicly humiliated at the very event I had funded. I slowly rose from the table, grabbed my bag with determination, and began walking deliberately toward the head table. My steps were firm and resolute, my resolve crystal clear. Several people began watching me curiously, clearly intrigued to discover what I intended to do. The room gradually grew quieter as I continued my walk. When I reached the bride and groom's table, I politely excused myself and said in a clear voice, "Excuse me, I'd like to make a short speech." Michael looked at me with evident surprise and hesitantly replied, "Mom, you really don't need to say anything. The speeches have already been made." But I firmly insisted, "Son, I need to speak. It's extremely important. I have something very meaningful to share with everyone present." Ashley was looking at me with an expression of barely concealed panic, as if she instinctively knew I had discovered her duplicity and was about to expose it publicly. Her eyes were wide, and I could see she was struggling to maintain her composure. I grabbed the microphone without waiting for any further objections and turned to face the 300 guests present. I took a deep breath, gathered my thoughts, and began in a clear and controlled voice. "Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me properly yet, I'm Linda Thompson, mother of the groom, Michael. First, I'd like to sincerely thank you all for being here with us on this special and meaningful day. It truly is an extraordinarily beautiful party, don't you think?" The guests murmured their agreement, and some clapped politely. I continued in a stronger voice. "This magnificent party cost exactly $75,000. I know this precise amount because I paid every penny myself out of my own pocket. I paid for the bride's stunning dress, all the sophisticated decor you see, this exceptional gourmet buffet, the music, the church, the honeymoon in the Caribbean, literally everything you're enjoying tonight." The silence in the room became absolute and heavy. All conversations ceased instantly. 300 people were staring at me with rapt attention, clearly shocked by the direction my speech was taking. Michael was flushed with embarrassment, and Ashley was pale as a sheet, clearly terrified. I continued relentlessly. I used my savings from 25 years of hard work as a nurse, cashed out my entire private pension, went into debt at the bank, and sold precious family jewels inherited from my parents. I made all these financial sacrifices because I loved my son and my future daughter-in-law, because I wanted to give them the dream wedding they deserved. Some people in the audience began to murmur quietly, visibly uncomfortable with the direction of the situation. I looked directly at Ashley and said, "But I discovered today, on the day of the wedding itself, that despite having financed every aspect of this celebration, I wasn't considered important enough to sit at the head table with the family." The groom's mother, who sacrificed so much to make this day possible, was deliberately relegated to the back of the room as an irrelevant guest. The murmur in the audience grew visibly louder. Several people were shaking their heads in obvious disapproval. I continued. What's more, I heard my dear daughter-in-law instructing the bridesmaids to keep me away from the head table, saying I hadn't been invited to sit there. This after months of calling me her dream mother-in-law and saying she loved me like a second mother. Ashley tried desperately to interrupt me. Mrs. Thompson, please, I can explain all of this. But I didn't let her finish. You don't need to explain anything, dear Ashley. Your actions and attitudes already explained everything perfectly. You manipulated me psychologically to get the expensive wedding you always dreamed of, and then discarded me like trash at the very event I funded. The awkwardness in the room was palpable now. Michael stood up, trying to stop me. Mom, please don't do this here publicly. We can talk about all this privately later. But I looked straight at him and said, Son, do you clearly see the kind of woman you chose to marry? Someone who deliberately humiliates me on the very wedding day I paid for, who blatantly lies to her friends about who actually funded this party, who treats me like an inconvenient stranger after everything I've sacrificed. The room was now completely silent. I saw that many guests were visibly shocked and embarrassed, some shaking their heads in clear disapproval of Ashley's behavior. The bride's parents looked mortified by the situation. Ashley had begun to cry, but I could see they weren't. Tears of genuine regret, but tears of anger and frustration at having been publicly exposed. I continued my speech, everyone. I wanted you all to know the full truth about who really made this party possible. It wasn't the bride's parents, as mentioned in previous speeches. It wasn't a collective family effort, as has been implied. It was me and Nurse, who worked double shifts for years to raise this money, and who is now being deliberately humiliated by the person who should love, respect, and honor me like a second mother. The tension in the air was so thick it could have been cut with a knife. I handed the microphone back to the MC and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, I will now leave this party that I financed, but where I am clearly neither welcome nor respected. Michael, when you get tired of being manipulated and controlled and want to have an honest conversation with your mother, you know exactly where to find me. Ashley, congratulations on your expensive and lavish wedding. I sincerely hope it was worth losing a mother-in-law who genuinely loved you. I began walking purposefully toward the hall's exit. To my surprise, several guests spontaneously stood up and approached me as I walked. Many expressed that I was absolutely right, that Ashley's behavior had been completely unacceptable and disrespectful. Some older women hugged me and whispered that they would do exactly the same thing in my place, that they had great respect for my courage. When I reached the parking lot, Michael came running desperately after me. Mom, please wait. We can talk about this whole situation. I stopped, turned to face him, and said firmly, Son, there's absolutely nothing to talk about right now. You knowingly chose a woman who humiliates, manipulates, and publicly disrespects me. Now you'll have to live with the consequences of that choice. When you get tired of being treated the same manipulative way she treated me, when you finally open your eyes to who she really is, you know where to find me. I drove home, with my heart simultaneously broken and liberated. There was a strange but powerful feeling of restored dignity, of having finally stood up for my own worth and self-respect. I had shown everyone present who Ashley really was behind the charming facade, and I had opened my son's eyes even if he wasn't yet ready to accept the reality. In the days immediately following the wedding, I received dozens of calls and messages from relatives, friends, and even acquaintances who were present at the reception. Everyone without exception told me I had done the right thing, that Ashley's behavior had been indefensible. Some people confessed that they had suspected her questionable character for some time, but didn't know how to alert me without seeming intrusive or malicious. One of Michael's aunts called me specifically to say she was shocked by Ashley's ingratitude, and that several people at the party commented among themselves that they had never seen such disrespectful behavior from a daughter-in-law toward her mother-in-law. He said many guests left the party commenting on my courage and dignity. Michael didn't speak to me for almost a month. Ashley posted hundreds of photos of the wedding on social media. over the following weeks, but carefully avoided including any of me. In the images she shared publicly, it appeared as if the party had been financed and organized solely by her parents. The lies and manipulation continued even after I had publicly exposed the truth to 300 people. 6 weeks after the wedding, Michael finally showed up at my house on a Thursday afternoon. He was visibly haggard with dark circles under his eyes, clearly not well physically or emotionally. He said he desperately needed to talk to me, that he had thought deeply about everything that had happened at the party, that there were some important things he needed to tell me. We sat in the living room and he immediately started crying like he hadn't since he was a child. "Mom, I'm so sorry for everything. I really didn't know Ashley had said those terrible things about you. I didn't know you were deliberately feeling left out and disrespected throughout the preparations. I genuinely thought you were happy and proud to help with the wedding, that everything was running smoothly." I responded carefully, "Son, I was genuinely happy to help initially. The fundamental problem is that you two systematically used me. Ashley manipulated me emotionally to get the lavish wedding she always dreamed of and then discarded me as if I were completely insignificant and irrelevant." Michael then revealed information that shocked me even more. He said that after the party, dozens of guests approached him personally to comment on what had happened. Many expressed genuine shock and embarrassment at Ashley's behavior, saying it was completely unacceptable to treat his mother-in-law that way after everything I had done. Some close relatives were brutally blunt, saying he had married a manipulative gold digger. Furthermore, Michael finally began to notice other behavioral patterns in Ashley that had previously gone completely unnoticed or rationalized. She was spending exorbitant amounts on designer clothes, expensive beauty products, and monthly beauty treatments, always justifying herself by saying she needed to stay beautiful and elegant for him. She was constantly and increasingly pressuring them to buy a larger, more luxurious home, even though she knew it would create significant financial hardship for them. Whenever Michael tried to talk about the need to save money and live within their means, Ashley responded with emotional manipulation, telling him he was being stingy and cheap, that a real man should be able to provide comfort and luxury for his wife. He constantly made hateful comparisons to her friends' husbands, claiming they earned more money and bought their wives more expensive things. Michael also revealed to me that Ashley had begun consistently making extremely negative comments about me, saying I was controlling and meddling, that his mother-in-law should know better, and that he urgently needed to cut the cord with me. He argued that our close relationship was harmful and unhealthy, that it was significantly damaging their marriage. 3 weeks after our emotional conversation, Michael returned to my house completely distraught and panicked. He discovered that Ashley had been having secret and suspicious phone conversations with a longtime ex-boyfriend. When he questioned her directly about these calls, she evasively replied that it was just an innocent friendship, but the conversations always took place when he wasn't home, and she always hung up quickly when he arrived. Even more devastating, Michael discovered through his own investigation that Ashley had lied about fundamental aspects of her past. She had always claimed she had never had a serious relationship before him, that he was the first man she truly loved. But Michael discovered that she had been engaged to another man just 2 years before meeting him, and that her previous engagement had ended because she had cheated on her fiancé with his best man at a bachelor party. The final and most shocking discovery came when Michael received an unexpected call from a friend of Ashley's demanding payment on a loan he was completely unaware of. Ashley had borrowed $3,000 in his name without consulting or informing him, claiming to her friend that they were experiencing serious financial difficulties due to excessive wedding spending. She had lied about our family situation and created a false narrative to obtain money. At this crucial moment, Michael finally came to a clear understanding of the true nature of the woman he had married. He realized that she was fundamentally manipulative, deceitful, self-serving, and unfaithful. She had married him not out of genuine love, but because she saw in him and our family an opportunity for social and financial advancement, a chance to live a more comfortable and luxurious life. Michael apologized deeply and sincerely for not listening to me sooner, for allowing Ashley to systematically disrespect me for not publicly acknowledging my sacrifice on our wedding day. He said he deeply regretted getting married, that he had made the biggest mistake of his life, that he felt as if he had betrayed the trust and love of the only person who had ever genuinely been there for him. I spoke at length with my son about the fundamental importance of him making his own decisions about his future, of not allowing anyone, not even me as his mother, to inappropriately influence his personal choices. I told him that no matter what he decided about marriage, I would always be there to support him completely, because a mother's love is truly unconditional and unbreakable. 10 months after that disastrous marriage, Michael finally made the courageous decision to separate from Ashley for good. The legal process was extremely difficult and emotionally painful, but he understood that he could no longer live with someone he could no longer trust, who constantly manipulated him and who showed no respect for his family. Ashley desperately tried every way possible to prevent the separation. She came to my house several times, crying dramatically, begging me to convince Michael to give her a second chance. She swore she had completely changed, that she recognized all her mistakes, that she truly loved me like a real mother, and that she would never do anything to disrespect me again. But I made it clear that she had definitively lost my trust and respect on her wedding day, when she chose to publicly humiliate me after I'd sacrificed everything to make her dream come true. I explained that trust once broken in this way is virtually impossible to rebuild completely. Today, 3 years after that memorable party, I can say with absolute certainty that that was the day I rediscovered my inner strength and personal dignity. For many months, I felt guilty for having seemingly ruined my only son's wedding, but after much reflection, I clearly understood that I had ruined absolutely nothing. I had simply exposed the truth about a person who was systematically manipulating and harming our family. Michael is doing very well these days, dating a wonderful young lawyer named Jennifer, who has treated me with genuine affection, respect, and gratitude since the first day I met her. She values our close relationship and understands that a man who loves and respects his mother will likely be a loving and respectful partner. He has learned valuable lessons about identifying manipulative behavior and appreciating people who truly love him unconditionally. Our mother-son relationship has grown even stronger and deeper after this traumatic but educational experience. As for the $75,000 I spent on that wedding, I've never regretted it for a second. It was money I'd saved specifically to help my son through important moments in his life. And that's exactly what I did. Money can always be recovered with work, time, and determination, but personal dignity, once lost or compromised, is infinitely more difficult to fully regain. That day at Crystal Gardens, in front of 300 people, I made a conscious and definitive choice for my dignity and self-respect. And I have never regretted that courageous decision. This transformative experience taught me fundamental lessons about human relationships. I learned that we should never accept disrespect from anyone, regardless of how close they supposedly are to us. That sometimes it's absolutely necessary to have the courage to face extremely difficult situations and expose the truth, even when it temporarily hurts people we love deeply. I also learned that true and genuine love never manipulates, never knowingly humiliates, never uses others for material or social gain. Authentic love respects, values, protects, and honors. Ashley never truly loved me. She merely used false feelings and calculated emotional manipulation to get exactly what she always wanted. Today, when I look back on that experience, I clearly see that that moment of courage in the ballroom was a true turning point in my personal life. It was the exact moment I definitively stopped being someone who accepts any treatment to please others and became someone who deeply understands their own worth and doesn't accept anything less than they deserve. If you're going through a similar situation, if you're being systematically disrespected by people who should value and honor you, always remember that you deserve to be treated with dignity, respect, and genuine love. Don't accept crumbs of affection from people who should give you true and unconditional love. Have the courage to stand up for yourself, to speak the truth even when it's painful, to defend your own worth and dignity. Sometimes we lose important people in the process of defending ourselves, but if these people only stayed with us while we were useful or convenient, to them then, they weren't people who genuinely deserved to be in our lives. True love weathers storms, accepts imperfections, and values authentic qualities. Anything false, manipulative, or self-serving inevitably falls away when courageously confronted with the truth. My story didn't have the traditional fairy tale ending I dreamed of, with grandchildren playing happily in my house and a daughter-in-law who truly loved me like a second mother. But it had an even better and more meaningful ending, a powerful rediscovery of my own inner strength, the complete recovery of my personal dignity, and an even stronger, more honest, and deeper relationship with my son. Today, I know with absolute certainty that I'm worth infinitely more than I thought I was before this experience. I know I deserve genuine respect, true affection, and recognition for the sacrifices I make for the people I love. And most importantly, I know I have enough courage to bravely face any challenging situation life may throw at me in the future. If you emotionally resonated with my story, please leave a like to help me reach more people who desperately need to hear this message of hope and empowerment. In the comments, share your experience. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to courageously choose between pleasing others and defending your own dignity? Subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this. What part of my story resonated most emotionally with you? Share this video with someone you know who desperately needs to hear this powerful message that we all deserve to be treated with respect, true love, and basic human dignity.